The Silent Neighbor Chapter 1. The echo of absence, the silence in Oakhaven was a living thing, thick and cloying, a stark contrast to the relentless city Lark had left behind. Her car, a sputtering relic packed with boxes of true crime podcasts and lukewarm coffee, chugged up the gravel drive leading to a house that looked like it had been plucked from a forgotten postcard. It was a charming, if slightly neglected, Victorian with peeling paint and a porch swing that groaned under the weight of memory. This was it, her base of operations for the Oakhaven Hauntings podcast. Lark Daniels, at 28, had carved out a niche in the saturated world of true crime with her meticulously researched, empathetic approach. But her latest season felt hollow. She needed something real, something that hadn't been picked clean by internet sleuths and network specials. Oakhaven, with its 20-year-old cold case, the vanishing of twins, Sarah and Emily Thorne, promised untouched ground. The key was under a faded ceramic frog, just as her landlord, a perpetually busy man named Mr. Henderson, had instructed. The air inside the house was stale, scented with dust and the ghost of old wood polish. Lark dropped her duffel bag in the living room, a space dominated by a grand, unlit fireplace and windows framed by heavy, moth-eaten curtains. "All right, Oakhaven," she muttered to the empty room. "Let's see what you're hiding." Her first priority was to set up her recording equipment. The spare bedroom, overlooking a wild tangle of overgrown rose bushes and a glimpse of a neighboring house, became her temporary studio. It was smaller, cozier, and felt less observed. She plugged in her laptop, adjusted her microphone, and surveyed the quiet street. The other houses were mostly obscured by ancient trees, but directly across from her window, a small, meticulously kept cottage stood out. Its windows, unlike her own, were draped with thick, opaque lace. As she was unpacking a box of books, a soft tap echoed from her front door. She frowned. Mr. Henderson had said he wouldn't be around until next week. Cautiously, she approached, peering through the peephole. An elderly woman stood on her porch, frail and small, holding a wicker basket laden with what looked like freshly baked bread. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her skin, though wrinkled, held a delicate, almost translucent quality. Her eyes, however, were the most striking feature, a clouded, milky blue. Blindness. Lark opened the door slowly. "Can I help you?" A gentle smile spread across the woman's face. "Hello, dear, I heard you moving in. I'm Alina Vance, your new neighbor." Her voice was soft, like rustling leaves. "Welcome to Oakhaven. I hope you'll find it peaceful." Lark returned the smile, feeling an unexpected warmth. "Lark Daniels, it's lovely to meet you, Alina, and thank you, the bread smells incredible. Just a little something. I always like to welcome new folks. Not many new faces around here these days." Alina gestured vaguely with the basket. "I understand you're here for a bit of a research project." Lark's eyebrows rose slightly. Word traveled fast in small towns, even 20-year-old word. "Yes, I'm a podcaster." "I'm looking into the Thorne twins case." Alina's smile didn't falter, but a flicker of something unreadable crossed her features before she turned her head slightly, as if listening to something only she could hear. "Ah, yes, a tragedy. The poor Thorne girls, the town has never quite recovered." She paused, then added, "You'll find people here quiet about it, best not to stir too much." "I understand," Lark said, though she had no intention of being quiet. "But I believe every story deserves to be told." Alina nodded. "Indeed. Well, I must be going. Do let me know if you need anything at all. My house is just across the way." She indicated the cottage with the lace-covered windows. "I'm always home." As Alina slowly turned and shuffled back down the path, Lark watched her go, a strange prickle of unease mixing with the pleasant aroma of the bread. Always home. It was a comforting thought in a way, but also a little unsettling. The silence of Oakhaven suddenly felt less peaceful and more watchful. Chapter 2. The whispering boards. The bread was delicious, dense and fragrant with rosemary. Lark ate half of it for dinner, hunched over her laptop, sifting through digitized newspaper clippings and grainy police reports. The Thorne twins, Sarah and Emily, had vanished without a trace from their backyard in a warm August afternoon in 2004. No forced entry, no ransom note, just two empty swings swaying in the breeze. The local police, led by a now-retired Chief Miller, had been baffled. The initial search was extensive, but Oakhaven was surrounded by dense forest, and the terrain was unforgiving. Eventually, the case went cold, leaving behind a wound that never quite healed. Lark spent the next few days in a familiar rhythm, researching, recording, and exploring. She interviewed the few townsfolk willing to speak, mostly hushed whispers about bad luck and that poor family. Everyone remembered the twins, but no one seemed to remember anything useful. The common thread was a chilling lack of eyewitnesses, despite the mid-afternoon timing. Her rental house, despite its initial charm, began to feel active, not in a supernatural way, but in an acoustic one. The old floorboards groaned underfoot, not just when she walked, but sometimes when she was sitting still. The wind whistled through loose window frames with a mournful cry that sounded uncannily like a whispered name. She dismissed it as the quirks of an old house. One evening, while setting up her microphone, she noticed a faint scent, metallic, like old pennies mixed with something earthy. She traced it to a section of the living room floor near the fireplace. The wood there seemed newer, a slightly different shade than the surrounding planks. Curious, Lark knelt down, running her fingers along the grain. The boards were tightly fitted, but her investigative instincts flared. She tried to pry them, but they were firmly in place. Later, she remembered Mr. Henderson mentioning a toolkit in the shed out back. Armed with a crowbar, a flashlight, and a rising sense of anticipation, she returned to the living room. The crowbar scraped against the wood as she worked. Each creak was amplified in the quiet house. Finally, with a sharp crack, a section of the floorboards came loose. A rush of cold, musty air wafted up from the darkness below. Lark shone her flashlight into the opening. It revealed not dirt or foundation, but a narrow, unlit space, a hidden basement. It wasn't a cellar, but a small, carefully constructed room. Her heart began to pound with a mixture of excitement and dread. This was more than just an old house. This was a house with secrets. She lowered herself carefully into the gloom, her shoes landing on a compacted dirt floor. The air was thick and heavy, smelling of damp earth, and something indescribable, ancient and sharp. As her eyes adjusted, the flashlight beam danced across rough-hewn shelves lining the walls. On these shelves, carefully arranged, were objects that made the blood drain from Lark's face. A small, scuffed school shoe, a faded, ribbon-tied diary with Sarah meticulously embroidered on the cover. A broken porcelain doll, missing an eye, dressed in a tiny yellow sundress identical to one the missing Emily Thorne was said to have worn. And, most horrifyingly, a lock of long, dark hair, neatly braided and tucked into a clear plastic baggie, next to a Polaroid photograph of two smiling girls. Sarah and Emily. Lark felt a scream catch in her throat, a cold wave of nausea washing over her. These weren't just artifacts, they were trophies. And they were here, hidden beneath her rental house. The rental house, owned by Mr. Henderson. Her mind raced. Had he known? Was he involved? The sheer audacity of it, renting out a house with such a dark secret literally underfoot. She scrambled back up through the opening, heart hammering against her ribs, leaving the crowbar glinting in the newly revealed darkness. She had stumbled onto something far bigger, far darker than a cold case. She had found a killer's lair. And suddenly, the silence of Oakhaven wasn't just watchful, it felt predatory. Chapter 3. The unblinking Lark didn't sleep that night. Her mind cycled through every chilling detail, the shoe, the diary, the hair, the trophies. She spent hours researching Mr. Henderson online. He was a realtor, a pillar of the community, no apparent skeletons in his closet beyond a few bad Yelp reviews about slow repairs. His alibi for 20 years ago, vague, a business trip, unconfirmed. It was thin, but not damning. The next morning, driven by a desperate need for answers, Lark packed her recording gear and drove to the Oakhaven Historical Society. It was less a society and more a dusty room attached to the public library, presided over by a stoic woman named Ms. Albright, whose bifocals were permanently perched on the end of her nose. Lark found a treasure trove of old town records, property deeds, and even local gossip columns from the time of the disappearances. She learned that the house she was renting had once belonged to the Thorne family. Mr. Henderson had bought it from the bank after the Thornes, shattered by their loss, had moved away. This detail, though not direct evidence, tightened the noose of suspicion around him. As she was leaving the library, a small, handwritten note tucked into a copy of the Oakhaven Chronicle caught her eye. It was an obituary dating back 10 years. Eleanor Vance. Beloved wife, mother, friend, died peacefully in her sleep. Lark blinked. Eleanor Vance, her sweet, elderly, blind neighbor, the woman who had given her bread just days ago, but the obituary clearly stated she had passed a decade prior. A shiver traced its way down Lark's spine. What did that mean? Had she imagined Eleanor? Was grief making her hallucinate? No, the bread had been real. She hurried back to her car, her thoughts a jumble of hidden basements, suspicious landlords, and spectral neighbors. She pulled out her phone, dialing Mr. Henderson's number. It went straight to voicemail. "Mr. Henderson," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I need to talk to you about the house. Urgently, please call me back." She drove directly home, her eyes darting to Aliner's cottage. The lace curtains were still drawn, impenetrable. As she pulled into her driveway, she noticed something new, a small, almost invisible camera lens, no bigger than a pinprick, embedded in the frame of the window directly opposite Aliner's house. Her breath hitched. Had it been there before? She got out of her car, her gaze sweeping over her own house. And then she saw another, and another. Tiny, pinhole cameras strategically placed in the eaves near the porch light, even subtly integrated into the decorative wooden trim. She wasn't just being watched. She was under surveillance. And the only house with a direct, unobstructed view of hers was Aliner Vance's. Lark felt a cold dread seep into her bones. The obituary, the blind woman, the cameras. It was a terrifying, illogical puzzle. Aliner wasn't blind. She was an observer. And if Aliner Vance had been dead for 10 years, who was the woman who had brought her bread? The implications were staggering, horrifying. This wasn't about a cold case anymore. This was about her. Lark stumbled into her house, locking the door, her hands shaking. The floorboards above the hidden basement felt like they were vibrating with malevolent energy. She needed proof. And she needed to be careful. Chapter 4. The puppet master's stage Lark decided on a dangerous strategy. Play along. She would act as if she knew nothing, all while secretly trying to uncover the truth about Aliner Vance and the network of cameras. She tried to record her findings, but the thought of the cameras gave her pause. What if they had microphones? What if she was the podcast? She started small. She left her curtains open, offering a clear view of her living room. She deliberately moved her research materials about the Thorne twins to a prominent spot on her coffee table. She even talked to herself loudly about her theories regarding Mr. Henderson, hopping to feed false information to her unseen audience. Days blurred into a tense game of cat and mouse. She found herself constantly scanning her surroundings, a gnawing paranoia taking root. The silence of Oakhaven no longer felt peaceful. It felt like a held breath. One afternoon, a delivery truck pulled up to Aliner's house. A package was delivered. Lark watched through her window as a younger woman, with dark hair and a brisk demeanor, signed for it before disappearing inside. The woman was definitely not the Aliner Lark had met. A new player. This was getting more complicated. Lark's suspicions about Aliner only intensified. She discreetly began researching the Vance family history, using the library's archives. She found mention of Aliner's daughter, Clara Vance, a reclusive woman who had inherited the cottage. Clara, unlike her mother, had never been seen much in town. That night after darkness had fallen, Lark made her move. She had noticed a subtle glimmer on the window sill of Aliner's cottage, a tiny lens reflecting the streetlights. She needed to get closer, to confirm her suspicions. Armed with a small pair of binoculars and a heavy dose of adrenaline, Lark crept out of her house, careful to stay in the shadows of the overgrown bushes. The air was cool, smelling of damp earth. Each rustle of leaves sounded like a shout. She made her way across her yard, careful to avoid the cameras she suspected were hidden there. She reached the edge of Aliner's property, hiding behind a thick rhododendron bush. Through the binoculars, she focused on the cottage's windows. What she saw sent a fresh wave of ice through her veins. Behind the lace curtains, which had seemed so opaque from a distance, was a narrow gap. And through that gap, a sophisticated monitoring setup. Multiple screens, glowing faintly, displayed live feeds from various angles. Her own living room, her kitchen, even her recording studio, all laid out like a twisted tableau. And seated in front of the screens, her back to Lark, was the dark-haired woman she'd seen earlier that day. Clara Vance. But on a small table beside her, bathed in the eerie glow of the monitors, was a faded photograph. It was a picture of a young Aliner Vance, standing beside a much younger Clara. The resemblance was uncanny, but more disturbing was the way Clara had meticulously styled her hair, replicating her mother's neat bun. She was wearing a similar old-fashioned dress. Clara Vance wasn't just mimicking her mother. She was her mother. At least that was the persona she presented to the outside world, the persona she had presented to Lark. The blind, sweet, elderly neighbor was a meticulously crafted illusion. Suddenly, a faint sound reached Lark's ears, a soft, melodic hum coming from inside the cottage. It was a lullaby, a very specific lullaby. It was the same one Sarah Thorne's mother had told police she used to sing to her twins every night before they disappeared. Lark's blood ran cold. The woman wasn't just watching her, she was orchestrating her. She was a puppet master, and Lark was dancing on her strings. The Oakhaven Hauntings podcast wasn't about uncovering a cold case. It was about becoming part of a new one. Chapter 5. The final episode. Lark knew she couldn't stay. She also knew she couldn't just leave. Clara Vance had created a stage, and Lark was the unwilling star. The trophies in the hidden basement, the cameras, the chilling lullaby, it all painted a picture of a meticulously planned, deeply disturbed individual. She needed to expose her. But how Lark returned to her house, her mind racing. She went to her recording studio, the space that had felt so safe just weeks ago, now a cage under Clara's gaze. She stared at her microphone, her laptop, the podcast. This was her only weapon. She began to record. She spoke in hushed tones, her voice raw with terror, detailing everything she had found. The hidden basement, the trophies, the cameras, the elaborate deception of a leaner Vance. She knew Clara was listening. She wanted her to listen. "Clara," Lark whispered into the microphone, "I know you're there, I know you're watching, and I know what you did to Sarah and Emily Thorne." She described the items in the basement, the lullaby, the meticulous planning. She addressed Clara directly, trying to get a rise, a reaction. She even pulled out the obituary for a leaner Vance, reading it aloud for her unseen audience. As she spoke, she realized the subtle changes in her house were not random. The whispering boards had always been Clara's presence, the feeling of being watched, the peaceful silence. Clara had been collecting, observing, perfecting her craft for 20 years. Suddenly, her phone, which she had placed on the desk, vibrated. It was a text message from an unknown number. "You're getting close, Lark." "But you're missing the best part." Lark's hands trembled. Clara wasn't just listening, she was interacting. This wasn't just a podcast anymore, it was a deadly dialogue. She continued to record, her voice trembling but resolute. "You want a story, Clara? You want an audience? Fine, I'll give it to you. The world will know what you've done." A new text message flashed on her screen. "Come to my house, Lark. The real story is here. The final episode." Lark stared at the message, her heart pounding. It was a trap, she knew it. But a part of her, the true crime podcaster, the seeker of truth, couldn't resist. This was her chance, her only chance. She grabbed her phone, still recording, and slowly, deliberately walked out of her house. The night air was cold against her face. The faint glow from Clara's monitors across the way seemed to beckon her. As she stepped onto the gravel path, she saw the dark-haired woman, Clara Vance, standing on her porch. She was wearing the same old-fashioned dress, her hair in the neat bun. But her eyes, though not clouded, held a disturbing intensity. There was no sweetness now, only a chilling, triumphant gleam. "Welcome, Lark," Clara said, her voice smooth and unnervingly calm, a stark contrast to the innocent Alina. "I've been waiting for you." Lark raised her phone, the recording app still running, capturing every sound, every word. "The world will know, Clara," she repeated, her voice clearer now, stronger. "They'll know everything." Clara smiled, a slow, predatory smile that twisted her features. "Oh, I hope so, dear, because this time they'll have a real ending." As Lark took her first step onto Clara's path, the image model will be able to show a glimpse of the interior of Clara's cottage, revealing not just more screens, but shelves filled with miniature, meticulously crafted dioramas depicting various scenes from the Thorne twins' disappearance and the subsequent investigation. A chilling display of Clara's obsession. Asterisk, the last thing Lark heard before Clara's door clicked shut behind her. Sealing her into the meticulously constructed narrative was the faint, sweet melody of the lullaby, playing softly from somewhere within the cottage. The Oakhaven Hauntings podcast was about to air its most chilling, and perhaps its final, episode.